Shadowverse. Deep Space and High Strangeness Events Rescue. ... Jane looks out of the front viewing window of the 800-foot-long Star Drifter Series Echo 01 interstellar warp ship. She frowns as they enter a star system 2,000 light-years from Earth's Sol system. Moving at 50% light speed, they follow a projected path towards one of the system's planets. The alien system's all-consuming darkness overlaid with images of other vessels and stations moving around the central star. She looks over at Mark. It's been a century since, she starts to say. Mark sighs. I know, Mom. Maybe, don't. Just don't right now, she snaps at him. As their ship enters the system, it detects an alien vessel approaching. The ship's AI, a feminine voice, announces the incoming contact. Valorian research vessel Trinity on intercept course. Jane turns her attention back to the viewscreen. As the Valorian vessel gets closer, it becomes clear that it's heavily damaged and drifting aimlessly through space. Jane and Mark exchange worried glances before ordering the AI to hail them. Unknown vessel, this is the Trinity. Request assistance, comes the static-filled reply. Jane looks at Mark. Go get your brother Meliadar and prep the rescue units. As Mark nods and leaves the bridge, Jane takes a deep breath before answering the hail. This is Jane of the Star Drifter Series Echo 01. We've detected your distress signal. Stand by for rescue. The Valorian ship responds, thank you, Echo 01. We are in dire need of assistance. Our crew is injured and our systems are failing. Please hurry. As Mark returns with Meliadar, the rescue units are already being deployed from the Echo 1. Jane looks over to Mark and Meliadar. All right, everyone. Let's hope we can save these poor souls. She taps her console, and the SDS Echo 1 begins its approach to the Trinity. As they get closer, the extent of the damage becomes more apparent. Captain, we've reached the Trinity. Their hull is breached in several locations, and there's a significant energy leakage, reports one of the rescue units. Prepare for docking. We'll have to do this quickly, Jane orders. As the Echo 1 docks with the Trinity, the airlocks seal, and Jane, Mark, and Meliadar enter the stricken vessel. The corridors are littered with debris and the smell of burnt metal fills the air. Jane's mind goes back to the Great Catastrophe and the Echo 01's prototype ship. Mark notices and puts a hand on her shoulder. I know, it's just like when the Archons took over our ship. But it's not them, Mom. We haven't seen them since that day. Jane nods, trying to focus on the task at hand. Right, let's get to work. The sooner we can stabilize their systems, the better their chances. She turns to Meliadar. Can you assess the damage and provide an estimate on how long it will take to repair? Meliadar grabs her arm. Mom, stop, we need to get off now. These energy levels are far too high already. We'll barely get away from the explosion. She looks at Meliadar, a hint of worry in her eyes. I understand your concern, Meliadar, but we can't abandon them. They might be our only chance to find out what happened to Blaze. She takes a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. Let's proceed with caution. The team makes their way through the corridors of the Trinity, feeling the vibrations of the ship's damaged systems as they move. They reach the bridge and find the main console flickering with strange energy patterns. Jane begins to hyperventilate as she remembers the bridge on the original Echo 1 minute before the explosion that blew apart Jupiter and took Blaze as he stopped the portal. She grits her teeth and forces herself to focus. Moving over to the safe rooms, she sees there are a mix of humans and other creatures taking shelter inside. As Jane begins to interact with the console, she sees strange symbols flashing across the screen. She recognizes them as part of an ancient language she once studied on Earth. With a deep breath, she reaches out and begins to decipher the code. As she does so, strange energies begin to course through her body. She can feel her mind expanding, reaching out to understand the intricacies of the language and the technology before her. The symbols change, shifting and morphing as she works. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, she completes the sequence. The safe room doors open and the survivors slowly come out to greet them. Stepping back from the console, she feels a strange sense of accomplishment wash over her. The survivors look at her with a mix of awe and fear, unsure of what to make of the woman who seems to be able to control such powerful technology. She looks at the captain of the Trinity. What happened here? she asks as they move quickly back towards the Echo 1. We were ambushed by a group of raiders, the captain replies, his voice gruff. They were after the ship's supplies and weapons. We managed to fight them off, but not before they damaged the engine core. That's when the alarms went off, and we had to evacuate, but the pods malfunctioned. As they reach the Echo 1, Jane and Mark help the survivors board the ship. Once inside, Jane turns to the captain. How many survivors are there? She asks, her voice calm and collected. 25, the captain replies. She sighs in relief. Could be a lot worse than that, she thinks. As the survivors settle into their new quarters on the Echo 1, Jane turns her attention back to the damaged engine core. She begins running diagnostics and checking the power levels, hoping to find a way to repair the damage without letting it destroy the ship and data onboard. Meliadar glares at his mother. Look, I know you want to save their research, but let it go. She looks at the energy readings. But if a similar energy signature warped the original Echo 1 somewhere? Meliadar shakes his head. No, Mom, I don't think so. The Echo 1 was a one-of-a-kind prototype. Even if by some miracle another ship with a similar energy signature were to appear, it doesn't mean anything. The explosion wiped out half of Jupiter and blinded most of the people on Earth. Dad's dead, Mom. Just leave it at that, he says, holding back tears. As Jane continues to work on the damaged engine core of the Trinity remotely, she notices a sudden change in the energy readings. It's faint but unmistakable, a warp signature, similar to Blaze's Echo 1 military test vessel. She quickly shares the information with Mark, who confirms the reading. Before she can finish saving all the core settings, the SDS Echo 1 pulls out of range, jumping to light speed as the Trinity explodes, giving off many suns worth of energy. Jane gasps as the enormous explosion sends shockwaves through space. The SDS Echo 1 shuddering violently. Looking over the data, Jane punches the console. Hey, Mark shouts, jumping away as her fist tears through the station. Meliadar looks at Jane and Mark, his eyes widening. What happened? Are you both okay? He asks, rushing over to them. Jane turns to Meliadar, her eyes filled with determination. We found a trace of Blaze's ship, the Echo 1. Mark sighs. Mom, it's been 100 years. He'd have found us a long time ago if he was alive. Jane shakes her head. No, Mark, I'm sure he's still out there somewhere. We can't give up on him. Meliadar shakes his head. We have been wasting money and suffering out here so much trying to find him. He's dead, okay? Spread over space by a core explosion, he snaps. Jane looks at Meliadar, her eyes filled with sorrow. I wish it was that simple, Meliadar. But I can't shake this feeling that Blaze is still alive, somewhere out there. Mark sighs, his expression grim. Mom, it's been 100 years. If we are gonna make the remembrance ceremony, we should head for the Sol system. Jane nods in agreement, her mind still fixated on finding Blaze. All right, let's do it. But we won't stop searching for him. She turns to Meliadar, her face hardening. And if you find anything at all that could lead us to him, you tell me immediately. Meliadar nods. Yes, ma'am, he replies as he heads to the navigation station of the ship. The personal interstellar ship gifted to them by the government after their heroic deeds saving the planet from certain doom. Designed long before the D.S.H.R. After taking the rescued researchers to their embassy in Sol system. The SDS Echo 1 arrives on Earth just in time for the day of remembrance of the Great Catastrophe. As the Echo 1 descends through the Earth's atmosphere, it catches the attention of the local military forces. The ship's unique design and advanced technology make it stand out from any known craft. Despite initial tension, the crew manages to identify themselves as friendly and are escorted to a secure landing zone. As the SDS Echo 01 touches down, the crew prepares to disembark. Jane and Mark step out onto the tarmac, ready to face the crowds gathered for the remembrance ceremony. They are greeted by high-ranking officials from the SDS, an organization formed from the original military contractors and researcher teams to work on the Echo 01 prototype ships and future warp-capable vessels. They express their gratitude for their heroic actions during the Great Catastrophe, carrying on the charade hiding the demonic threat. Awaiting to cross through the military test ship SDSM, the Echo 01's glowing warp core, a portal siphoning energy from the dark void. Meliadar waves, nodding as he thinks to himself. It's a good thing most warp cores made later are tuned to be unusable to entities in the void. Literally why high strangeness emergency rescue exists. Bet the universe would love to know that. His mother nudges him. Careful thinking about that without a mental block, there are civilian mind readers in the crowd. She says telepathically. Meliadar frowns. Maybe they should know. He sends back. Turning to a group approaching, Jane nods graciously to another news crew's praise, well adjusted to the fame and attention. Thank you for your kind words. We're just happy to have played a part in saving our world and connecting Earth to the rest of the universe, she says softly, glancing at Mark beside her. A few hours later in their home along the coast, Jane looks across the ocean. I still can't believe they actually covered it up. And still no one has a clue. They caused the catastrophe to begin with. She looks over at Mark, her eyes filled with concern. Mom, are you all right? You seem a bit out of it, he asks. I'm fine, just thinking about everything that's happened, she replies, taking a deep breath. Well, let's not dwell on it too much, her son says. We need to focus on our next high strangeness adventure. As they sit there, looking out at the endless ocean, Jane can't help but wonder what their next task will be. I wish Blaze had let me do missions like I do now, she thinks as the waves roll in. Just then an alarm goes off in the house. Startled, Jane and Mark jump to their feet. What was that? Jane asks, her eyes darting around the room. Another alarm goes off, this time from their communications device. Jane picks it up and frowns as she reads the message. Mark, we need to go. Now, she says, her voice urgent. Without waiting for a response, she heads towards the door, her boots thudding against the floor. Behind her, Mark follows suit, his own footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As they reach the ship, Jane activates the engines and the vessel hums to life. She guides it out of the hangar and into the open sky, her hands gripping the dual flight sticks shaking slightly. Mark sits at the navigation and comms station, his eyes fixed on the readings. He relays information to the inner solar system traffic controllers and they relay course and speed corrections to Jane. As Jane expertly navigates the starship through the vast expanse of space, she can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. She checks the ship's sensors repeatedly, hoping to pick up any odd transmissions. Mark turns to her. This is SDS Echo 01, crossing into unregulated space. In 3.2.1, path clear ahead, going to 2 light-years per second towards black hole HR 6819. He says to ISSTC. The voice of the ISSTC crackles over the comms system. Acknowledged, Echo 01. Travel safely. We'll update you in the quantum waves if we receive any relevant information about your target location. Jane nods in response, her fingers tightening around the flight sticks. Mark sighs. Is this another lead on Dad? He asks. Jane hesitates for a moment before answering, her gaze fixed on the controls. No, Mark, it's a rescue mission, unknown anomaly and a possible civilian vessel, but that's all we know. She glances at him, her expression etched with worry. We will find your father eventually, she adds. Mark turns back to his console. Come on, it's been 100 years. We don't even know if we do reincarnate either, do we? He says. Jane winces at Mark's words, feeling a pang of guilt. She knows he's right, but she can't help but cling to the hope that they'll find Blaze one day. I know, Mark, she says softly. But we have to keep looking. This isn't about that though. A ship is in trouble near the hole. We will be there in 3 minutes if we push it. As SDS Echo 01 approaches black hole HR 6819, they begin to feel the gravitational forces pulling at their ship. The darkness of space seeming to get darker as the hole grows in size. Echo 1's quantum sensors scan around the black hole as best it can. The feeding black hole's radiation interfering with them. Mark looks over the same image as Jane at her console. Nothing's out there. Even if there is, there's no way our sensors can find them if they're close to HR 6819. He says to her. Jane frowns as she studies the readings on her console. I know, but we can't just ignore it. It was a sightseeing vessel. 500 feet long with 500 passengers. She turns to face Mark. We have to investigate. We owe it to anyone who might be in trouble. Echo 1's quantum sensors pick up a faint signal from the other side of the black hole. It's weak and distorted, but it's there. As Jane and Mark discuss their options, the signal grows stronger. There's something over there, all right. She gestures, pointing. The sensors zoom in on the distressed ship. Its core putting out its safe maximum limit. Though it remains stationary, Mark detests. Mom, don't. If our ship touches their field, we'll both be vaporized, he says. Jane nods, acknowledging the danger but unwilling to ignore the potential crisis. I know, but we can't just leave them to their fate. We have to try and help them. She activates the comm system, hoping to make contact with the stricken ship. This is the interstellar vessel Echo 1, please respond. Just then emergency high-speed warp flares fire from the front of the sightseeing vessel D.S.H.R. The flares able to just escape the hull's pull but then fall back towards it, only a few hundred meters away. Looking out through the window, the AI overlays the ultra-redshifted craft to its physical location, showing the invisible to the eye situation. As Jane and Mark observe the situation unfolding before them, they realize that the D.S.H.R. is in grave danger. Jane shakes her head. I don't see how they need assistance. Their warp core easily has the power to pull away from the gravity field from their position, she thinks. The emergency warp flares a desperate call for help to escape the gravitational pull of the black hole. Jane pushes the left stick forward. Mark swallows nervously. Our ship can handle it. Every year they get a new update, we get it first, and we have illegal hardware for exactly missions like these, he thinks. Jane's hands dance across the console as the Echo 1 moves closer to the D.S.H.R. Jane activates the tractor beam, hoping it will be enough to stabilize the other ship and stop its slow fall towards the event horizon. Unable to direct enough power, the ships slowly move closer to the hole. Jane turns the ship around and fires the projectile harpoons into the flow of gravity around the black hole. The spears arc away, curving towards the ship. Jane pulls the cables tight and the ship vibrates. Pushing the power up higher, the warp drive kicks in, but the warp fields eat away at the cables, snapping them. Mark shakes his head. We can't pull them like that anyway in a warp field of their own. Thinking fast, Jane programs Echo 1's energy field to match D.S.H.R.'s. Mom. Wait. Before he can stop her, the field of the ship flips and a burst of bright light flashes, blinding all on board as a dull heat fills the ship. Jane, having weakened the force cancellation around her chair, guides the ship blind. Suddenly there's an impact as their vision starts to return. Mark jumps back from the viewing windows as he realizes the Echo 1 is pushing into the other ship. Jane pushes the core to half power, and the field of both ships increases in strength. Echo -1 shudders as the two craft begin to easily pull away, though D.S.H.R. begins to give under the immense gravity. The armor plating begins to fracture and Echo 1 lurches a few feet as the other ship's inner hull buckles. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocks the vessels as a warp core absorption module mount is twisted by the buckling, white-hot energy erupting from the opposite side of the ship. Jane quickly increases power to the engines, propelling Echo 1 away from the impending catastrophe, leaning Echo 1 into a rolling climb. D.S.H.R. slips off as a glowing mess of crushed and twisted metal, exploding just as Jane warps to 10 light-years per second, barely escaping. Unable to dock with the vessel as the fields concentrate, exploding between airlocks in energized testing. As the 550 lives are blown into darkness by the blinding energy, Mark looks over at his mother as she tries to breathe. She looks at Mark as the weight of the soon-to-be-reported tragedy crushes her. Meliadar looks at her concerned. Are you okay, mother? You look exhausted. Jane takes a deep breath, whispers to her children. I'm fine, darling, just a bit overwhelmed. Looking at Mark and Meliadar, her eyes filled with sadness. All on board look out the windows at the glowing remnant left behind by the doomed ship. Flipping to the quantum all-direction comms systems, Jane steadies herself. Star Drifter Series Echo 1. Rescue and recovery of D.S.H.R. has failed. She pauses. Gravitational overload of the structure, due to close proximity to the event horizon, docking and rescue was impossible. No life pods launched. All lives lost due to core explosion seconds. After multiple failures to retrieve. SDS Echo 1 owner, pilot and captain Jane Seed. Event time: May 20, 2500, 12:03 a.m. going by Sol system Earth time. She says numbly through the universe-wide quantum emergency comms and reporting system. The news spreads almost instantaneously as trillions catch transmission. Mark looks at Jane, his heart heavy. "I'm sorry, Mother." Jane sighs. Cause of incident according to Hamlet's Drifter Emergency System's last transmission. Human error as the captain took the ship to close and failed to maintain safe distance. She says finishing the universe-wide transmission. She sighs, turning to Mark and Meliadar, her eyes filled with sorrow. Mark shifts uncomfortably. "Isn't it odd though that it's right after the anniversary of the only other warp core accident?" he asks her. Jane frowns, deep in thought. It's possible that the anniversary may have had an emotional impact on the crew, increasing the chances of human error. But we can't be sure without further investigation. She pauses, looking out into space. "We should keep our guard up and be extra cautious." Looking at the scanners, she squints as they show no change in the distance between the black hole and the Echo 1. Pushing the power up slightly, there's no change. Mark monitor core cooling system temperatures. Suddenly the ship is pulled towards the feeding hole. Pushing the power up more, the ship shudders, and stress sensors in the core room show an odd phenomenon as the core itself tries to move without the ship. Electrical discharges seem to tear at reality. The core stressing its containment mounts. Pulling back the power as alarms go off, the ship again slips towards the inky darkness of the event horizon. The stress on containment fades along with the strange electrical discharges. Mark looks at his mother. "Core temp rising fast. Whatever is going on, we need to figure out what it is," he tells her. She glances at her readouts, worry etched on her face. "I agree, Mark. This is unknown. We need to run some diagnostics and see if we can identify the cause." She opens the Universal Emergency Channel this time. SDS Echo 1 in need of assistance. Unable to escape HR 6819 due to an anomalous force restricting movement. May also be what ensnared Hamlet's drifter. She says and fires the emergency warp beacons. As they watch the projectiles arc in the gravity field, they also record the distortions. Jane isolates the ship's sensor readings to her station. And increases sensitivity. "What the hell is that?" she whispers, looking at the scans. Thinking she comes up with nothing. "This is SDS Echo 01. Do not attempt rescue. Anomalous force is unpredictable and inescapable. Whatever it is." She pauses. The ship can overpower it, but the warp core tries to pull itself from its mount. As if something's holding the hull and pulling on the core's energy field. "Do not approach." Mark looks at Jane. "Understood, SDS Echo 01. We'll proceed with caution. Do you have any idea what this anomaly could be?" A black site station inquires as the Universal Comms filters her transmissions of classified information. Jane shakes her head, still studying the readings. "Nothing concrete yet," she says, lying. The sensors showing a mass of energy reaching from beyond the event horizon. Jane looks at the visual cameras as tendrils of darkness darker than the space itself reach out and go invisible nearing the ship. The AI activates the alarm as radiation levels start to overwhelm the ship's systems. Accretion disk energy exposure limit nearing shielding capacity. Charged particle accumulation nearing unsafe levels. Jane chuckle. "We can't get away so." She activates the ship's offensive weapons as she overrides the core cooling system's safety. Pushing the purge, a large red-hot radiator core is jettisoned into space, quickly falling into the black hole. The replacement unit moves into place, the cooling system closes and the core is pushed to full power, turning the ship around as the weapon's energy draw is maxed. She fires towards the densest part of the mass holding the ship. Plasma bolts and antimatter warp rockets, bright blips of light in the darkness impacting the anomalous entity. The weapons impacting, a ripple effect going through the dark tendrils as they dissipate. The ship breaks free of the mass and Jane maneuvers as she pushes to 100 light-years per second. The quantum sensors showing the mass within the hull almost reaching them again. Seeming to only reach a few 100,000 miles from the hull itself, the sensors show it shrink back across the horizon. She watches as the tendrils of darkness disappear. Her heart racing with adrenaline. After taking a deep breath to calm herself. "That was too close," she mutters. Warping back to Earth at 150 light-years per second. She taps Mark in the shoulder. "I'm going to lay down. Take over for me," she tells him as she goes to her quarters. ... A day later at the repair yard as she finishes moving supplies for a friend, Jane stares at the crushed rear of Echo 01, as if a giant tentacle wrapped around the ship's tail. Then turns to the inspector as he finishes talking and shakes her head. That's not an option. This ship has been through hell and back, but it still stands. We'll find a way to make the repairs happen. It's been through worse than this, trust me. We'll get it done. The man nods slowly, understanding her resolve. All right, ma'am, I'll do my best to find a way to make it happen. With that, Jane turns her attention back to the scanner readings on her data pad. She feels a wave of exhaustion wash over her as she continues to monitor the ship's systems. Moving to her quarters aboard ship, she falls into her soft, warm bed. Her mind cold and numb. As she sleeps, a harp plays a soft melody echoing through her mind as she walks through the gates of a massive castle. Familiar, yet strange, like a memory from another lifetime. She tries to grasp at where the mountain-sized castle lies, but it slips away, leaving her feeling strangely restless. Suddenly, the ship rocks violently, jolting her awake. Sitting up in bed, heart racing as she wonders what's happening. The emergency alert blares, red light flashing around her quarters. She quickly throws on her flight jacket and runs to the bridge, her boots thudding against the metal floor. As she enters, she's met with a scene of chaos, the crew scrambling to stabilize the ship as it lists heavily to one side. She grits her teeth. Report. The ship's AI responds. Anomalous dense object detected. Weight distribution to the aft starboard imbalanced. Effective G-load 50 times Earth gravity and weakening. Jane glances at the readouts, her eyes narrowing in concentration as she tries to figure out what's causing the imbalance. She thinks back to the black hole anomaly, the energy reading is similar. Pondering the potential threat, she feels a sudden rush of energy fill the room. The ship shudders violently. Jane thinks they've been struck by something, and when she looks out the viewport, she sees the repair yard in chaos as small unfastened things fly around at random. Turning to the front window, she spots a large crane having collapsed into the Echo 1. Her heart racing, she turns to her crew. Prepare for emergency evacuation. Get me a status report on our warp core stability. She listens to the AI and feels a sense of relief. Warp core stable and under no stresses. Jane nods. Good. Let's hope it stays that way. Mark, get down to engineering and help maintain the core stability. The rest of you, focus on the evacuation procedures. We don't have much time. ... Hours after the repair yard incident, Jane sits at home watching the news on the event. As Jane watches the news, she sees reports of freak accident at warp ship repair yard. The footage shows chaos and destruction, with debris flying everywhere. Though there are added explosions. The narrator speculates about possible causes, including malfunctions in the repair equipment or a rare cosmic event. Jane chuckles. That figures right. They don't show what actually happened. Smirking as she sees the inaccurate reports on the news. She knows that it was no accident, but rather a deliberate attack by forces beyond their understanding. However, she is also relieved that her family was not harmed during the ordeal. Her thoughts are interrupted by a notification on her wrist computer. The ship inspector and damage estimator. I can't even get a number on the repairs. Also, Universe Craft and Safety Regulators have deemed the SDS Echo 01 unsafe to operate and unfit for repair. The message says. Jane frowns as she reads the message from SIDE. She knew that the repair would not be cheap or easy, but she didn't expect the ship to be deemed unsafe for repairs. Looking around her house, her mind goes back to the few years before the Great Catastrophe, how she and Blaze had designed the SDS Echo 1 together as a side project. She steadies herself as a few tears fall from her eyes. As she reads the next message from SIDE, her heart sinks as she realizes the ship will need to be scrapped. As Jane finishes reading the message, a bitter taste fills her mouth. The loss of their beloved ship is more than just a financial burden, it represents years of hard work and countless memories shared with Blaze. She takes a deep breath to steady herself before composing a response to SIDE. I don't know if they will touch this, but I will try to contact our original employers who helped build it. Jane nods, understanding the gravity of the situation. She knows that the military was one of the few entities that had the resources and expertise to salvage the ship. Even so, she begins to research her options, hoping against hope that there might be a chance to save Echo 01 if they refuse. Within a few hours there is a knock at the door of her quiet island home. Walking over to the front entrance, she sees her son's key on the table. Damn it, he went out and locked the door again, she thinks. Reaching the door, she unlocks and opens it. Unexpectedly, a light-armored black site MP stares at her through his tinted visor, and her son Mark stands beside him. Jane's eyes widen in surprise. Her son, Mark, looks equally as shocked, his brows furrowed in confusion. "Ma'am, may I come in?" the MP asks politely, his tone formal. Mark looks at her, then back to the MP. She hesitates for a moment before stepping aside for them to enter. As she closes the door, she can't help but wonder what this unexpected visit is about. The man walks into the living room and produces a hologram projector. From it, the image of a major based at Area 51 appears. "Jane," the man begins, "we've received information that you and Mark may be in danger." Her eyes widen as she listens intently as he continues. "There have been reports of demons trying to find you. We believe they're after something you possess, or something you can do. This may also be related to the Hamlet's Drifter incident and similar signatures to entities aboard the original Echo 01. We're also detected," he says. Jane looks at the Major, her heart racing. "So what do you propose?" she asks, trying to keep her voice steady. The Major nods at the black site MP, who hands her a small data chip. "We've managed to salvage some information from the SDS Echo 01. We arranged transport for you to our location at Area 51. We will talk more upon your arrival." Jane looks at the data chip in her hand. "We'll be ready to leave as soon as possible," she says, slipping the chip into her pocket. "Thank you for letting us know." The black site MP nods and steps forward to retrieve the projector, but stops as he looks to the frosted sliding glass doors to the backyard facing the beach. Echo 01 D.S.H.S.R continued. A faint tapping sound coming from the other side. Like someone or something trying to get in. Major. I think we have an intruder," the black site MP says. Jane and Mark exchange worried glances as something taps on the glass harder this time, as if keeping seconds. Seeming to melt in the frame, a shadowy figure pushes through the glass as the metal of the door corrodes away. Red energy bolts fill the room with bursts of angry light as they hurtle towards the creature, hitting it but not hurting it much. Mark fires his own pistol, the shots dissipating before reaching the creature as it smirks, dodging blasts from Jane's plasma weapon. It crosses the room. As it tackles her to the ground, the house shakes as the breath is knocked out of her. Her mind racing through what seems like 100,000 years. The creature glares at her and shrieks, "Why won't you die?" It yells as the floor around them in a circle shows centuries of decay within its personal space. A furious white plasma bolt hits the creature in the head, knocking it to the ground. The time-altering effect vanishing as its focus is broken. Quickly rolling away, Jane hits the wall as the MP fires several more blasts rapidly. The creature hisses in pain and starts to fade. "You fool, you should have let her die," it hisses before dissipating into mist and drifting away. "What the fuck was that?" It shrugged off the energy pistols like nothing. The black site MP demands, still shaken from the encounter. Jane stumbles a little, then collapses to the floor. Mark rushes over to her, kneeling at her side. Mom, are you okay?" he asks frantically. Her eyes flutter and she looks up at him, a strange expression on her face. Something just reminded me," she whispers. The black site MP radios for backup, telling them they've got an intruder on the loose. He stands guard over Jane and Mark, his weapon raised and ready. The door to the room slides open and another group of MPs rush in. "What's the situation here?" one of the other MP asks as Jane passes out. The first MP reports what happened and they quickly tend to Jane. Taking her to the waiting transport, Mark is allowed to follow but is told to stay out of the way. A few hours later at the base, once they are alone in the infirmary, one of the MPs turns to Mark. "Your mother. She's been through a lot. Like 200,000 years of aging. If she wasn't an eternal, she'd be dust," he says as Mark notices it's not the same MP from the house. "An eternal?" Mark asks, confused. The MP nods. "It's a rare and powerful gift. It means that Jane, Mirab, whatever her name is. She is technically immortal like yourself and your family. She can't die. Not unless. He trails off, not wanting to finish. Unless killed by things other than time or normal illnesses. Mark stares at the MP, his mind reeling. Eternal. Immortal. So many things he's heard about but never truly believed. As they wait for Jane to wake up, he can't help but wonder what else he doesn't know about his family and their past. ... A few months later, Jane looks out the bulletproof window of a Humvee as it rockets across the desert at 90 miles per hour. Meliadar squints. Where are we going, mother? His voice tinged with concern. We're going to meet someone, she replies cryptically. Someone who might have some information we need. The Humvee rounds a bend in the road and comes to a halt outside an old, abandoned warehouse. Several soldiers quickly move out and scan the area as their laser sights cut through the dust and blowing sand. Shadow 1, we've got movement. One of the soldiers reports. It's a group of demons, heading this way. Jane sighs. Well, looks like our contact's here, she mutters as she exits the Humvee and draws her plasma rifle. Let's go see what they got for us. As they approach the warehouse, Jane and Meliadar can see a group of demons inside surrounding a man dressed in black. The man's features obscured by his hood as he carries himself with an air of authority. The lasers used to measure energy effectiveness burn the skin of the demon sizzling. Is there a reason for the energy beams? One asks angrily. Jane smirks. What the lasers, those just help our guns adjust to be effective. She says, aiming at a different demon. Its skin at first affected little but then taking more damage as the gun adjusts its energy frequency. The demon sneers. You've made your point, humans. Get those pestering beams off us. The demons request. Jane steps forward. Just a precaution, not all are friendly, she says. The demons hiss in annoyance. The hooded man glances at her for a moment before looking at the demons. Very well, he says calmly. We will speak with them under their conditions. You are the one they call. Jane begins, but is cut off by the man. I am he, the wizard of the modern age, Mihrad. Easily confused with Mirab, he says. Jane blinks in surprise. You've heard of me, Mihrad nods. Yes, I have. You are Jane, are you not? The one who was once known as Mirab. Jane hesitates for a moment before replying. Yes, I am Jane. Mihrad smiles slightly. And you are here because you seek information about Blaze, he asks cautiously. Jane's expression grows more serious. Yes, we need to find him, she blurts out. Mark sighs, looking at her as Meliadar hangs his head slightly. Mihrad pauses, considering his next words carefully. I may have heard something. The demons behind him shift nervously, sensing the tension in the air. Mihrad, one of them whispers, are you sure this is wise? He ignores the demon, keeping his focus on Jane. I've heard rumors of a man who shares similarities with Blaze. We've never seen eye to eye on some things. But he is rather interesting. Jane leans forward, her eyes narrowing. Where can we find him? She asks urgently. Mihrad shrugs. The world where I first encountered Blaze so many years ago. The planet Serenity, but that was about 120 years ago. Mihrad sighs, running a hand through his hair. You'd need access to a warp drive. Jane looks at him. And what is it you want for this information? She asks. Mihrad smirks. Nothing much. $1 million would be nice. He says. Jane sighs. What else do you know? She inquires, feeling he has more to tell. Mihrad smiles. The owner of the planet Serenity is kind of eccentric and slightly communist, but not Stalin level. Rather peaceful man, or cyborg nowadays anyway. He is very strict, though it is a prison planet for rehabilitation. He tells her. Jane nods. Thank you for the information, she says, then looks over at Mark, who reluctantly goes along with the deal. We've wired the money to your account, she says as Mihrad's phone chimes. Meliadar looks up, concern etching his features. Really, mother? He thinks in exasperation. Mihrad's expression softens as he glances at the younger man. Thank you. I hope this information leads you to what you're looking for. He stands, straightening his jacket. Well then, if that's all. He begins, but Jane cuts him off. One more thing, she starts to say. Mihrad chuckles. No more for now, sweetie, he says. A blinding flash and smoke bursts from around them and they vanish, teleporting away with a magic one-use stone. Jane and Mark gape in shock as the air around them wavers and returns to normal. What the hell? Jane whispers, her heart pounding. Mark shrugs nervously. I don't know, but we should probably get going. Mark stops his mother as they enter the Humvee. Really? You told me this was an official mission. What are we doing still looking for Dad? Jane sighs. I know, but I can't help but feel like we're missing something. She glances back at the abandoned warehouse, a weight settling in her stomach. We'll find him, Mark. I promise. Mark sighs. Mom, I wish he was here too. But he's not. He says, then walks away, getting in on the other side. Meliadar glances at her timidly. Mom, I know it's hard, but maybe Mark's right. And even if he isn't, Dad would either have found us or has a new life. He says as tears roll down his cheeks. Jane pulls her son close, wrapping him in a hug. I know, honey, I know. But I can't help feeling like there's still hope. She whispers, her own eyes misting over. ... The interstellar ship moves through the enveloping darkness, the simulated stars streaking past them like diamonds. Jane and Meliadar sit in silence, lost in their own thoughts. Jane knows that they need to move on, but a part of her won't let go of the hope that Blaze is still out there somewhere. Mark having stayed behind at Area 51, leaving Jane feeling off without her son's support. She looks over at Meliadar. Is it fair to drag him along with me? She thinks. The ship's computer chimes softly. Lieutenant Mirab, we're approaching the HR 6819 system. Shall I plot a course for the triple system's habitable zone? Jane looks out the window towards the black hole. Planet Serenity is by the Hamlet's Drifter disaster site. She asks the AI. Affirmative. It replies, then says. The check-in station is approximately 300 kilometers from the nearest inhabited planet. A checkpoint we must request passage from to enter the planet's atmosphere. Failure to do so will result in forced landing and temporary imprisonment for 30 days, as it is assumed a jailbreak is occurring. The AI says, relaying the planet's broadcasted rules. Jane considers this information. All right, plot a course for the check-in station orbiting the planet. The ship adjusts its course and speed, preparing for the arrival at the checkpoint. Jane takes a deep breath, trying to steel herself for the journey ahead. She looks over at Meliadar, her eyes filled with determination. Let's go find him, kiddo. Upon reaching the orbital station, the ship is scanned and suddenly the communication screen flickers on. A cyborg with glowing red energy within its silver metallic frame appears. Ah, if it isn't Jane. You may not remember me, but we go way back. Blaze has told me so much about your life the last time around. Come on down to the planet. No energy abilities or ruckus though. Can't have the patients getting any ideas. He says as a small escort ship arrives and signals to follow with its rear lighting. Jane glances at Meliadar, then back at the comm screen. All right, we're on our way down, she says, setting the ship to follow the escort. As the ship approaches the planet, Jane can't help but feel a sense of familiarity washing over her. The green and blue of the oceans, the white clouds floating in the sky. It all feels so right somehow. Once on the planet, the owner appears and introduces himself. Forgive the state of things, I'm your host Z.Z. It's been a long time, friends, come in and make yourselves at home. He says politely, his red energy fluctuating as he speaks. Jane nods, following with Meliadar close behind. It's good to see you again, Z.Z. How have you been holding up? She asks, glancing around the room they enter. It was chaotic for a while, but I was able to get things calmed down with Blaze's help, about 50 years ago. Good man that one. Jane smiles, but then. Wait, so he's alive, he remembers us, and he was here, she asks, confused as Meliadar looks at him. Oh yeah, he's alive all right. In fact, he's just recently departed. Well, a few years ago. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him though, Z.Z. says, looking somber. But he did leave you a message. He continues, handing Jane a small data chip. It's none of my business, but he seemed adamant that you not try to find him, Z.Z. says. He then looks over as an alarm goes off. Time for the daily snacks and tea, would you care to join me? He asks. Jane hesitates for a moment, glancing at Meliadar, then nods. Of course we'll join you, lead the way. Looking out across the town, they see others preparing food and tea as well. Meliadar looks at Z.Z. So is it a planet-wide thing? Tea and snacks, he asks. Z.Z. laughs. Oh no, it's just my little tradition here in this town. The people enjoy it, so why not? He says with a shrug, leading them towards a large open plaza filled with colorful tents and tables. This is where we usually gather, but I thought it best we have privacy. Jane glances over at him. So how did Blaze end up here? He was on a mission to find some ancient artifacts. Something about them having the power to stop demons from returning or something like that. ZZ explains as they sit. Anyway, he came across some sort of rift or portal. Didn't really understand it myself, but it brought him here. Said he came out of the black hole just after the great catastrophe. But he must be mistaken, as he claimed the ship exploded and then he was instantly thrown from the black hole. Without a ship, he chuckles. Only the interdimensionals can cross black holes that way. And very few ships. Under a colorful tent in the garden-like plaza, ZZ pours them each a cup of tea and has some pastries set out. As they stop by the orbital station to get scanned again, Jane can't help but feel a mix of anger and worry. All this time and he just let us think he was gone. She thinks to herself as the station clears them for departure. Meliadar looks at her, feeling her aura. Let's just be glad he's alive and not focus on the past, okay? He says gently, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. We can all talk about it as a family when we find him. They stay in touch with ZZ over the comms as he fills them in on details about the planet they'll be visiting and the people who live there. The comms project his voice to the bridge. The interdimensional city of Vendalar is home to many different races and cultures, all of whom have their own unique perspectives on the situation with the demons. If Blaze was to go anywhere, it would there, as they have an artifact he seeks, he says. Their ship, the Echo 02, begins its approach to the planet. The surface planet Vendal looming larger in the view screen. The interdimensional city of Vendalar can be seen as a shining beacon amidst the dark night below as they glide in. Setting down on their assigned pad, Jane powers down the ship as she looks out at the crystalline structures and white glowing forms wandering about. Meliadar takes point as they disembark the ship, his golden armor shining in the strange blue-white light emanating from the city. Jane follows, dressed in formal attire that seems to blend in with the whitish glow of the city. As they exit the pad, a being greets them warmly. You must be Jane. ZZ sent word ahead of your arrival. He informed us to help any way we can. If you'll follow us, the being says. It turns and splits into two forms. Jane glances at Meliadar, then follows. They eventually arrive at a towering spire of clear quartz that seems to pierce the heavens. Please, no fighting inside, the beings say simultaneously. Jane stops in her tracks within the door as she spots Blaze talking to a crystalline humanoid. Ignoring the two escorts, she walks over to him, grabbing by the shoulder, spinning him around, and he ducks as she tries to smack him. Where have you been? I thought you were dead. Or worse, you left us notes saying you were going on a suicide mission. Jane seethes. The humanoid looks at Meliadar, unreadable. This is not something I should interfere with. But if I may, Blaze looks at the humanoid. It's okay, I got this. He starts to say but is interrupted by a slap from Jane. I kinda expected this, he finishes, catching her next hit. He pulls her into a hug. Just let me explain, please, he says as she can't decide to punch or hug him to death. I did go on a suicide mission. Or at least it seemed like one. I met a man that I thought was just another demon, but he helped me remember things. About myself, about you, about Meliadar. He pauses for a moment, looking into Jane's eyes. About us. A few hours later they sit in Echo 02's cafeteria. So what do you remember? Meliadar asks as Jane angrily listens. Not much at first, just flashes of things, of being in hell, of the demons. And then there was this man. He looked like a human, but different. Older. He called himself Echo. He helped me escape and then he showed me things. Jane scoffs. You idiot, Echo is our ship's name. Are you sure you remember correctly? She asks. Blaze looks at her, confused. No, I think I'm remembering it right. It's not a ship. Echo was a consciousness within the ship. He showed me things about us. About our past lives. Meliadar frowns. And what did he want from you in return? Blaze thinks a moment. Well, not much really, just for his daughter to do well at her position as ruler. He just wanted to help out like some do. He says. Jane glares at him. So, he just wanted to be a father, huh? she says. That's all. More or less, he says. He cared about her. He wanted the best for her. Shaking her head, well, at least you're back, glad the wizard's tip lead us to ZZ and then you. She says smiling. Something causing him to frown. The only wizard I know is Echo, he says. Jane pulls up a hologram of Mihrad. Is this Echo? She asks, showing a picture of Mihrad. Blaze stares at the hologram, his eyes widening. Yes, that's him, he says. But how did you get a picture of him? She squints at him. He was your guy, right? Called himself Mihrad, not Echo. She tells him. Blaze laughs again. No, Echo is a shapeshifter. Not sure who Mihrad is. Pretty sure ZZ doesn't know him either. He pauses, thinking to himself. Okay, that's not possible anyway, cause Echo can't leave the other side. Confused, his wife looks at the wizard's picture again. So who is this Mihrad guy? Suddenly the image glows a purple color as there is a flash of light. Mihrad appears before them as he looks around. Seeing Blaze, he quickly draws a cartridge-based pistol and fires a hollow-tipped bullet point blank into his head. Blaze falls limp to the ground as Jane and Meliadar gasp in horror. Mihrad turns to Jane and smiles. You know what to do now, Jane, he says. She hesitates, looking at the body of her husband. But, we had just found him, she gasps, trying to breathe. Mihrad sighs and shakes his head. I'm sorry, sweetie, but this was always part of the plan. And my magic will ensure he never reincarnates again as well. Now get to work, you have a dark kingdom to rule, he says as he disappears in a flash of purple light. Jane looks at Meliadar, tears streaming down her face. Go, Radio Mark, tell him. Falling back against the wall, Jane goes numb as she hyperventilates. Her tears falling uncontrollably as she stares at Blaze across from her on the floor, blood pooling around his head. A strange purple energy crackling around the wound. Just then, she blinks and is sitting back at the table looking at him just before the attack as time seems to stand still. It wasn't real but will be if you don't act, a voice says softly. Things resume and she looks around. Meliadar glances at her. Mom, are you okay? You were telling Dad about Mihrad, he says as there's a flash of light. Mihrad looks around, Jane tackling him to the floor as he pulls a gun he tries to point at Blaze. No, Jane cries out, struggling to hold Mihrad down. Meliadar hesitates for a moment, watching his mother and the strange man struggle. Mihrad pushes her off of him and scrambles to his feet. You will not ruin her rule over the Dark Kingdoms any longer, he shouts, raising his gun. No, stop, she cries out as she leaps in front of Blaze, pushing him aside. Mom, Meliadar shouts as the gun fires. The room explodes in a flash of light. Jane lays on the floor, blood pooling around her body from a gunshot wound in the chest, tears streaming down Blaze's face as he pushes himself up. No, this can't, he whispers as Meliadar fires at Mihrad again, but he teleports away. Jane struggles to breathe as Blaze holds her in his arms and puts pressure on her wound. Jane, please hold on, just hold on baby, he says as he can hear the emergency crew coming. Meliadar stares at the ground, barely able to process what just happened. Mom, he whispers, falling to his knees beside her. As they wait for the emergency crew, Jane whispers something into Blaze's ear. When she's finished, he looks down at her with tears in his eyes. The medics rush in and tend to Jane. Though her injuries are severe, they manage to stabilize her and begin to prepare her for transport to a medical facility. As they work, Blaze leans close to her, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll find him, Jane, I promise I'll find him and make him pay. She nods weakly, her grip on Blaze's hand growing weaker. Be careful. Protect Mello. Protect the world, she says before losing consciousness. A medic pushes him back gently. Sir, I have asked that you stay here as the medical carrier only allows patients and staff, one of the crew says as they near the pad. Blaze nods as the transport sets down. Kissing her on the head, he backs away as they load her into the vessel and hurry away at Mach 5, rushing to the nearest emergency room. 7 days later. Jane wakes to the beeping of the machines around her. The room is dimly lit, and she feels a bit groggy from the painkillers they've given her. Looking around, She sees Blaze sitting in a chair next to her bed asleep, his head resting on a wet pillow atop the bedside table. She tries to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washes over her and she quickly lays back down. After a few moments, she manages to muster the strength to speak. Blaze. He jerks awake, looking relieved when he sees her eyes open. Jane, where are we? She asks, her voice barely above a whisper. You're in a medical facility on Earth, he replies, reaching out to take her hand. The doctors fixed you up as best they could. You've been unconscious for nearly a week. She nods weakly. He holds her hand, kissing it. Blaze, please don't leave again, she says. He looks into her eyes, pained. Jane, I need to find him. To stop him. I can't let him hurt you, or Mark, or Melio. She shakes her head slightly, wincing at the movement. No. Stay here, with us. Let me help you find him. Blaze shakes his head. I can't let you get hurt again, he says. She grabs his hand as he tries to move out of reach. Stop it, you're not in it alone, Blaze. He hesitates, watching her with tears in his eyes. Finally, he sighs and nods. Okay. The medical staff arrives, checking Jane's vitals and offering her some water. As they tend to her, Blaze pulls out his datapad, searching for information on their new quarry. Jane smiles at him, grateful that he's staying. Blaze looks over a file, pretending to read it. Okay, this isn't good. How do I get away and find this guy? He sighs at his stupidity. Something about ruining his daughter and her rule of the Dark Kingdom. He was specifically after me but used magic through. He thinks, looking at Jane. He closes his eyes, shaking his head at his first thoughts. Jane notices his odd behavior. What's wrong? She asks him as the nurses finish up. He takes a deep breath. There's a lot going on here, Jane. Things I didn't expect. We need to be careful. She nods, concerned. Tell me what you know. He shrugs. I know as much as you do. She frowns. Which isn't much, she says, looking out the window as she glances at him in her peripheral vision. He looks down at the floor a moment, then scratches his head. All this time and still the same giveaway. I just have to trust him, she thinks, feeling worried. 2 weeks later, Blaze sits on the beach thinking about the disaster. Looking across the ocean, he sighs heavily. Images of shadow beings ripping patients apart flash in his mind. Mihrad using their energy as locators. He speaks on his phone to his son Meliadar. That's such bullshit. Say his name 3 times and he can teleport through a picture. Who does that? And we can't even be close to each other, or he might just teleport where we are. Yeah, some crap about our energy reacting and being more noticeable when we are around each other. And it took a whole hospital being destroyed to figure that out, he says. On the other end of the phone, his son frowns. Dad, no one knew. It's not your fault. Blaze groans. I know, but I just feel like I could have done something. Anything to prevent that. You can still do something, Meliadar says. You can find this guy and stop him from hurting anyone else. He grits his teeth. Standing up, he notices a pressure-like feeling and looks up to see a seagull flying by as the pressure follows it. Tilting his head, looking back across the ocean, he sits back down. So is that where they took you, Jane? He wonders as he tries to think of how to find the ancient wizard Mihrad. Meliadar chuckles on the other line. Mom would be a good way to lure him in, you know. Blaze pauses for a moment. You should know how dumb that is, son. That would mean he gets to choose when to attack. If we find him on our own, we can catch him by surprise. Meliadar nods. Yeah, I guess you're right. He pauses for a moment, thinking. Well, just be careful, okay? I don't want to lose either of you again. You won't, son, I promise. I gotta get going. Talk to you later. Love you, son. Love you too, Dad. Be safe. Blaze hangs up, feeling slightly better. It's a few days later when Blaze, Meliadar and Mark are at the ship repair bay. Blaze is going over a list of systems he's planning on upgrading while Mark stands there looking out over the bay. Suddenly, his gaze locks onto someone walking towards them with 2 others. Dad, trouble, Mark says. Blaze looks over and sighs. Damn it, I told them I'd come to them with the information. You're not even going to fight back? Meliadar asks, sounding exasperated. Blaze shrugs. I'm trying to find your mother, remember? I can't exactly go around starting fights and drawing attention either. Meliadar grunts, but says nothing else. The three demons walk up to them, their energy formidable and intimidating even in their suppressed magic disguises. Well, says the tallest of the three. Look who decided to finally show themselves. Blaze glances at Mark, then back at the demon. What do you want? You know what we want. Blaze smirks. And you know what I want, but I could wait. I said on my time. Already been over 5 decades. So, he says as he starts to turn to leave. Oh, you think you can just walk away? The demon growls. The other two demons step forward. Blaze sighs and raises his hands in submission. Look, I'm not trying to be difficult, but really guys, he says, holding up a flash drive. Isn't this kinda not your thing though? The demon shrugs. It's all protected by energy fields that keep us out of some areas. It's not like I'm asking for much, he says. Fine, Blaze says, handing over the flash drive. But that's all I'm giving you. You try anything else and I will make you regret it. The demon takes the flash drive and inspects it. This better have everything we need. Blaze nods. It does. The demon looks around. A wolven in the Amazon saw her not long ago. You didn't hear it from me though. We don't care if you serve hell or not. We just want left in whatever peace we can find, he says, walking away. The three demons walk away, then turn invisible as they venture back to their neutral splinter faction. Blaze sighs. Well, that was easy, he says with a smile. Let's go find your mother. Meliadar looks at his father. What did you just give them? Just some information on the Wolven and the Shadowverse. I know them and they can be trusted, mostly. It's nothing that'll hurt anyone, Blaze says with a shrug. Besides, it's only credits and a bunch of stuff on finding restaurants and good food. And a tiny secret on avoiding high strangeness sweeps. Mark groans. Seriously, that's kind of a big deal, he says. Let's go find your mother. She must be worried sick. And like I said, I know them, they are brutal and mean, but they mostly leave humans alone. A few hours later their ship touches down and 3 of them set off into the jungle, heading in the direction they were told the Wolven had last been seen. Blaze leads while talking. The Wolven are a mix of wolf and other animals created by Tada, the same military we work for. Though they were meant for destruction but escaped in a crash, they were a real issue for a while. Till they calmed down. They are basically instinctually trained with special forces tactics and are as smart as humans. Can also turn other life forms into Wolven as well. Like I said, they calmed down a lot. Mark nods. They are still dangerous, but mostly they mind their own business. Which is good for us. Yeah, I suppose it could be worse, Meliadar says, looking around. But it could also be a lot better. Blaze sighs. Yeah, they lied to us from the start. Can't believe I really thought political types would actually keep their word, he says angrily. Meliadar frowns. Have you even talked to Mom since they split us up? Blaze shakes his head. No, and then being so secretive isn't helping them look good. I know that game too well, he says, breaking into a run through the dense jungle. Following him, Mark sighs. I guess we better get used to this, he mutters. Don't suppose there's any chance they'd take us back after all this time. Meliadar laughs at the thought of working directly with the military again as they move through the treetops at 50 miles per hour easily. The jungle seems alive with sound and movement. Birds sing in the distance, monkeys howl from the treetops, and strange insects buzz around them. The air is hot and humid, making it difficult to breathe. Meliadar lands next to his father near a cliff edge. Can we please not run anymore, he says, trying to catch his breath. Blaze glances back at his son. Sorry, but we have to keep moving. And stay out of sight. You know how it is, he says, not looking too pleased about it himself. Mark arrives next to them, panting heavily. I'm starting to hate running, he mutters. Blaze looks out over the jungle. If they can't take this, he thinks to himself. They find a hidden cave in the side of a hill, perfect for setting up camp. They light a fire and eat some food they brought with them. The cave is large enough to stand in comfortably, but not so large that it attracts unwanted attention. After eating, Blaze pulls out a small communicator as he wanders off by himself. Returning shortly after, he sits by the fire worried. Meliadar watches his father curiously. Everything all right, Dad? Blaze sighs and looks up at his son. Me and your mother tried staying in touch through hidden transmitters. Haven't heard from her much. But it's hard to get around the black site dead zones, he says. Mark looks up from where he's cleaning his rifle. Hey, maybe we should split up. You and Dad can go one way, and I can go another. Maybe that'll help us cover more ground, and find her faster. Blaze considers the idea for a moment before shaking his head. No, besides, Mehrad will be able to find us when we get close to your mother. I can't find him, but we can be ready if he teleports to us. Meliadar, but what if Mehrad finds us first? He asks, worry plain in his voice as he and Mark watch the cave entrance. Blaze nods, his expression solemn. Then, we'll just have to be ready for anything. He sits back against the cave wall, closing his eyes and trying to relax. When suddenly a strange energy appears from nowhere as his eyes close. He draws, firing his energy pistol 10 times faster than the blink of an eye into empty air. Looking, he sees Mehrad appear a few feet away holding out his hands, a blast of energy knocking Mark and Meliadar to the ground. Blaze rolling away from one aimed at him. The cave wall explodes from the blast, causing a collapse as Blaze dashes for the entrance. Looking back at the cave, Blaze aims his rifle as his sons recover and watch their backs. Mehrad's ethereal body glows brightly as he gathers magic power for another attack. Blaze fires a bolt of energy, striking Mehrad in the chest, knocking him back. Suddenly the man disappears in a flash, appearing behind Blaze. Ducking away from a manifested rock fist, he turns on his shoulder, rolling to a knee as he comes up shooting. Several high-energy bolts impact and Mehrad's energy body vanishes with a crackle of steam. Dad, Mark says hesitantly as he and Meliadar approach. Blaze turns to face them, his chest heaving. Are you all right? He asks, looking them over for injuries. Mark nods, his expression relieved. Yeah, just a little bruised. Mehrad smacks his altar, knocking over a bowl of blood. Damn it, why is the magic here so unorganized? He exclaims, glaring at his assistant. As Mehrad storms off, the assistant pales. What did I do wrong? He stammers, tears welling in his eyes. The demon lord pauses for a moment. He begins, but then shakes his head. Never mind.